Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of the Other Girls Club podcast. We are so lucky to have a guest with us today, and that guest is Lucy Dawson. Lucy Dawson is the internet's disabled queen, a brain disease survivor and the CEO of Wampers. Lucy survived a brain disease in 2017 and was left paralysed in one of her lower legs. Her journey is one of triumph as she has not only worked to regain her speech and mobility, but took to social media to share her journey. In her most vulnerable moments, she built a community where she educates people on disability, empowers other disabled women, and shares her sensational big bust outfits. Welcome, Lucy.
Hello, that bigs me up a lot. That makes me sound good.
I like to give people a big intro,
Hype.
you know? Yeah, give them a bit of hype so they come on like, yeah, I'm that bitch. And what? How are you, okay?
I'm good, thank you.
It's nice to have you here in
It's very
London.
exciting to be in the studio. I can't believe how professional it all looks.
She came in and went, oh, you're a professional.
And I am not.
We've never seen each other in a work capacity. We've only seen each other outside of like work, creative, like shit.
Me
So
usually with a few Prosecco's down me.
normally, yeah, or in my flat, like halfway through like a beer pong or something
Stealing all
like
your
that.
friends.
Yeah, it's fine. They love you. There's something I ask every guest when they come on. We want to know what you've been consuming, what you're about. So, what have you been watching
Do you know
lately?
what? It's actually such a good week for that because I have just absolutely binge watched Apple Cider Vinegar on Netflix. Have you?
I've not seen it
I
yet.
feel like you could do a whole podcast on that.
Really?
alone, yeah.
I've seen so many people talking about it. I want to watch it.
So it's about an influencer, an influencer called Belle Gibson, an Australian influencer, and she had like 2 million followers.
True story.
True story, yeah. And it's trigger warning for anyone that watches it who is in the illness space like we are. She was allegedly a brain cancer warrior, as they call it, as she called it, and she was treating her terminal cancer with health and wellness with fruit and veg and apple cider vinegar and such like, and encouraging other people to do the same. And she made an app called The Whole Pantry, which was signed by Apple, and she was mates with Steve and all of that. Anyway, turns out she didn't have.
She faked it.
She faked it.
Oh no. Well, whenever I was like, whenever the storyline is like, oh, they faked their disability or they weren't really ill, I'm like, oh, that's not good for us.
I know,
no.
I know, and I think like it's obviously like anytime a woman's story, like obviously the woman's the mega villain, but I also thought like that's how women are made to look, and it is terrible. Like it's absolutely terrible, and she obviously has something going on that. But also it's quite an interesting deep dive into the health and wellness industry, full stop, and how a lot of that is scam. And you can watch like parallels of the actual real life interviews with the real Belle Gibson, and then the Netflix show is, remember Inventing Anna about Anna's Albert? It's sort of done in that style, and it's a very, very good gripping watch. Highly recommend. I feel like you would watch it and be like, okay, I need to pick up my mic again.
I've got shit to say. Yeah. That's me whenever I watch something though. I'm like, I need to talk to someone about it immediately. Well, I'll watch it and I'll let you know. I think I'll give you a text.
For sure.
But thank you for coming on the pod. I feel like
worries.
I've wanted to get you on here for ages. And then you've actually been a very requested guest when Well, after you mentioned on your story the other day about how obviously there's like certain things you want to talk about, but like finding the right space to talk about them. The amount of people who had send me the story and be like, book it in.
No way.
Book it in now. We need to get this in. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank
and
you,
obviously
friends.
you're like, thank you for requesting me.
Thank you for liking me.
We love you. What are you talking about? Obviously we go way back though. I feel like I've like known about you from at least like 2018.
Yeah.
Like, but then obviously, we've we barely know each other inside of a work capacity. We've never worked together, but we've obviously, known each other outside of that. We've like been to each other's, like, you come to my flat party.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's probably like the early part of your journey, which I probably actually don't know that much about. So for my sake and for the viewers or listeners' sake, could you just tell us a little bit more about like the beginning of your journey?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because when you meet in like adult life like we did, and I remember when I first became disabled, like looking people up, and I remember seeing like Tess Daly and that, and it wasn't until like a year or so afterwards, and I remember finding your account and just being like, God damn. And I think specifically because you were absolutely beautiful, obviously, but also because you went to Lincoln Uni, and I was just like, how is this? And as you say, we both completely different stories, but we both became disabled and through traumatic incident, But you don't, when you make friends like that, you don't like sit down and say, so tell me what happened. Because it's just not something, we're just, that's what people think about disabled people, I guess, is that they're entitled to every bit of information off the bat. But it just doesn't happen like that, I think, when you understand each other's position.
Yeah.
So I was not at Lincoln University, but I live in Lincoln, and I was at Leicester Uni, and I was a very average, non-interesting kind of girl, really. Quite bubbly, had friends, etc., etc. And I was in my final year, studying criminology. And out of absolute nowhere, my behaviour just completely changed, and I was very confused all the time. I was crying about the most random things, like crying about the fact I didn't have a boyfriend, but like stuff that I never cared about.
Yeah.
But not just crying, like so incredibly upset about it that I was, shutting myself in my room and all of this. And yeah, my behaviour was just really uncharacteristic, and. But then I would say, it's the stress of uni and all of this. My housemates were obviously very confused about what was going on. And one morning, my housemate found me at 6 a.m. just screaming her name. I can't imagine how awful this was for them, honestly. It makes me sad. But just screaming her name at the top of my voice, not able to say anything else. And I was just, when she came in, I was just sat like in a ball in the middle of my room, just eyes wild and really distressed. She called my parents. They said, you need to get her to hospital. So she took me to hospital. They had a look at me. I think I was there for half an hour. They gave me some breathing exercises, sent me home, said she's had a panic attack, she's a little stressed. Anyway, fast forward, next day, same thing happens, a million times worse. Again, screaming my housemate's name. She comes in, and this time I'd pulled my bedroom to pieces, like just ripped everything from the wardrobes, from the walls and everything. And the next thing I remember is this bright light just shining in my face. And months after I found out, my parents had driven up because they were so worried, and my dad had started filming me straight away because he was so concerned to show the doctors. Anyway, very long day trying to get someone to take me into a hospital. Everyone said my postcode was wrong. On the way, my parents driving me to all these different hospitals, I was trying to get out the car, escape whilst it was going down the motorway. I was just manically laughing, really robotic, just completely not myself at all. Eventually, by the end of the day, I think they'd come at they'd set off at 6 a.m. It wasn't till 5:30 that eventually a hospital took me. They sort of had one look at me. In the waiting room, my mum had to sit on top of me to restrain me because I was trying to pull the hospital curtains down and obviously escape and everything. And they just said, she's had a mental breakdown. Didn't do any tests, didn't even do blood tests or anything like that. And that day, that was it. I was involuntary sectioned. And that's where I stayed for the next 3 months. Now, that would be troubling enough, but the problem was I wasn't having a mental breakdown. I had a rare brain disease called anti-NMDA receptor autoimmune encephalitis, which is an inflammation of the brain. So for 3 months, it was totally untreated in hospital. Not only was it untreated, but I was given all antipsychotic drugs and treated for a fictitious mental illness. So obviously it was allowed to get worse and worse and worse. At the very height of it, my body just completely shut down. All my autonomic functions, which are swallowing, blinking, etc., stopped. I couldn't talk, etc., etc. On my 21st birthday, happy birthday to me, they said to my mum and dad, so she's dying now. And we don't really know why, because people don't just die of a mental breakdown. But as sort of a final effort now, we can give her electroconvulsive therapy, which is like shock therapy. So, and at this point, I am dead to the I have no idea who I am, where I am, what's going on. I've left my own brain basically. So they give me on my 21st birthday, the story continues, 3 rounds of ECT, which triggered seizures in my brain. Now, bear in mind at this point, they still have no idea that I have a brain disease. So they're not treating a brain disease here. They're just trying to shock my brain out of its depression or mental breakdown, whatever's happening. But somehow the seizures in my brain triggered it to sort of shock reset itself. And that's the miracle part of the story. But it wasn't just a reset the illness, it was a reset, wipe your entire brain and then start again from scratch at a later date.
Factory reset settings.
Yeah, so that would be a interesting end to the story, but as we know, that wasn't.
There's more.
Yeah, because So that's going on. They put me back in my ward bed after the ECT. Obviously, you should probably be attended to after that and watched, monitored, but they didn't. They just left me on a bed, and there were 4 pillows behind my head, so I was propped up quite high. And we all know like a hospital bed has those metal sides up. There were no sides up on the bed, and I was having these big seizures. So I had an almighty seizure and fell out of the bed to one side because there was no side up. And next to the bed was a great big metal radiator pipe which had no cage on it, which in a psychiatric hospital is a terrible idea.
For any public space, very bad.
And because of the brain disease, I was catatonic. So when you're catatonic, your body's in, they call it rigid stupor. So if someone holds your arm up like that, it just stays there. You have no sort of say over what's going on with your body. So I couldn't feel what was going on. So I just laid on this pipe. My birthday's the end of November, so the pipe was pretty hot for an amount of time until another patient, I think, saw and started screaming for help. By the time someone came and found me, I had this almighty burn, but I didn't know I had a burn. It was then covered up from my family and everything for a long time. And because I was still very much out of it with the old brain diz, it wasn't told to us that had happened for probably a year. And instead, when I did start coming round and I was in this agonising pain and crying, screaming, I still couldn't communicate with anybody, couldn't talk or anything. It was very obvious that my leg wasn't working, but the doctors kept saying, well, once they finally diagnosed me with the brain disease, that was a side effect of that, and my body was just waking up. So if we hadn't done our own digging and pushing and forcing, I still to this day wouldn't have had the pieces slotted together that what had happened. The reason that the bottom of my leg is paralysed is directly because the burn is where my sciatic nerve is. So that's what happened. And then the years afterwards, I had to obviously learn everything from scratch again, which was very troublesome. And I do always say I did not have a mental illness when I was admitted to hospital, but by goodness, did they give me a few on the way out?
Well, oh my God, there's just so much there, isn't there? I feel like every part of the story, you just think, oh, and like that's it, right?
Yeah, I think because it's so, there's so much to it, that there's so many like intricate details that just every single quest has a side quest. Like there's every single moment that I could tell a huge in-depth story about, but those are the bones of it. And I sometimes feel like I do myself a disservice when I tell the story, because I know that there's so much more to it, but honestly, you'd be here for 8 weeks going through it all. It's just,
But it's hard, isn't it, when you're a presence online and you're trying to tell these stories, or you're trying to give people, because I don't know if you feel this, but when I'm online, I do feel like sometimes people have like a snapshot of me, because that's what online is, and I sometimes feel like the need to overshare to give them context as to who I am, because I don't want people to know me out of context. I want people to understand me and why I am the way that I am, good and bad, and why I do the things that I do. And I think one thing for me was having to accept that not everyone is going to know me in context, and not everyone wants to know me in context.
But also, they don't even not everyone deserves to, because the real intimate parts, especially having gone through something so traumatic, is that it's your own and it's so difficult to share really, really personal parts of your story with the internet, because you know that there's always somebody who's going to sort of stick the knife in regarding it. Like even. But take my situation, for example, and it's so well documented, and there's an apology, you can find it anywhere on the internet from the hospital. I've got a great big burn on my bum. Like it's very clearly real, undeniably real, with all this proven evidence, and there'll still be people who can't but help to fake claim, and you can't understand it. And I think you're actually the same, and I've heard you talk about this, and I wish I'd known more when I started writing on the internet, is that you give away your story at the start, and you don't realize that people are sort of using you for the inspiration porn. And like when you're really starting out with social media, like the thought of exposure or whatever, it is exciting, and that these people want to do an interview with me, that's amazing. And it's not until you take a step back years down the line, you think, I've told some really personal things, and I haven't, that all it's done really is put me in quite a vulnerable place with people, being able to pick apart the most awful time of my life.
Yeah.
And I've not been paid for it. I've just given the world my my trauma.
And I feel like people do that to women a lot, but especially to disabled women a lot. And I feel like I see like women in general, but also disabled women are so expected to just mind their trauma in order to like serve other people.
Yeah.
And like, we don't really get much back in from it. I want to, because I was like, I got very protective of myself and my story quite early on, because I realized like, if I want to do this long term, I've got to do it like on my terms, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, thanks for sharing. That's the first time I've heard it all in full, and I just like, it is unimaginable to think like this like beautiful like woman sitting in front of me. Like obviously I know you, and I'm so proud of everything that you've done and achieved, and like who you are, and like to think of you going through that, it's like day and night. Like I can't see that person, but obviously you must still carry that around with you. Do you sometimes still feel like that person?
100%. And I think going back to what you said a minute ago, I kind of feel like when you have these like shocking big stories, and you can't fill in every single blank with everyone, you kind of become worried that your story's a bit like sensationalized, and because it's so shocking and everything, that people don't understand that it's actually this huge trauma that's so life-changing. And yes, we can put on a show now and I can wear, but you always carry it with you, and that's the thing about trauma, and it comes out at the most random times. And I think this year in particular, I felt this very strange feeling around a particular week of the year, and I feel it at random times, and I'll look at the date and I'll be like, oh, it's because it's the anniversary, and I'm not even aware of it, but like your body carries it somehow, and it's like it knows. And I'll have like weeks at a time where I'll just be so down and just unable to sort of comprehend what's happened, and then you feel guilty because you're like, well, like I've done so much since, and by all intents and purposes, I'm in a much better position with my health today than I was then. So why do I still feel like I should be grateful for every day? But you still carry it in like such immense ways.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. I always feel guilty like complaining or whatever, but flipping heck, it was rather awful.
Yeah, it was awful, and in the grand scheme of things as well, like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
like you've managed to do so much in such a short amount of time since then. And I don't know if you're the same, but I know like for me, like when my accident happened, and then coming out of hospital, and then doing rehab and like all of that sort of stuff, doing physio, I think I was so focused on, I need to get my life back together. I need to like turn my life around, because I was in a really, really bad place. And I was so focused on recovery that I think that it wasn't until a few years down the line that I actually really kind of reckons up with what happened to me. And also, like as you say, like the side stories and the side quests of also what happened to me, like losing friends, losing my relationship, and all of that sort of stuff. Sometimes it wasn't until like a few years down the line that I was like, oh, that's not just a silly goofy story that built my character development. That happened to me. And it's sometimes not until I sometimes see the way it affects my relationships and the way that I behave now that I go, oh yeah, you're not completely over that, or you know, you're still holding on to that. And I feel like sometimes if you go for a traumatic incident, or whether it's an accident or an illness, whatever it is, sometimes you have to put recovery like at the forefront of what you do just to survival, and you're in survival mode, that you do almost kind of forget that this is a thing that has happened to you.
I think I don't know how much it was the same, but I feel because I became disabled at quite a young age, I feel like being at uni before and having like independence properly for the first time and experiencing all these things, suddenly afterwards I was trying to fight to prove that I could be independent again, and I couldn't be. But so I was not being honest with my family and everything about how hard things were, and I think that's something that I still struggle with today. And I've no matter how hard, and it's internalized ableism, no matter how hard I tell myself, you need help, you need, like, this is not working, I'll still try and force it to work.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's ridiculous, and it's at the detriment to absolutely everyone, and most of all myself. But somewhere inside you tells you that you should be getting on with it, and you should like if you ask for help now when you have got on with it for so long. And it's the very same thing with PIP, personal independent payment. I remember the like second time around that I ever got reviewed, I remember almost talking myself up to the assessor who was deciding whether I was going to get paid or not. Like something, for some reason, I wasn't even like giving them the full truth, because I felt like I had to be doing better than I was. And I don't know why it is, and I don't know if that's more common with girls as well. But
as you say, it is internalized ableism, but also because like I think disabled people for so long there's only ever like two camps of disability. There is like the superhero, like independent, doesn't let their circumstances get them down, or there is like Lou and Andy from Little Britain. You know what I mean? So there is like two very clear camps. You can either be inspiration or you can be a nuisance and a drain on society. And I think disabled people in general are so desperate to not want to be seen as a drain on society. It's so ingrained into us that, especially, you know, with the stage that we're in the economy and also the political landscape that we're in, disabled people are so scared of being seen as a drain on society that we do kind of like overcompensate, and like we hide how much, you know, maybe assistance that we do need. I think that is very common. Talking about more joyful matters, because your socials is joyful. Like I feel like whenever I see a reel pop up of yours, I know first of all I'm going to see a fucking great outfit. Like I know that I'm going to see some womps, which by the way, if anyone is like maybe not familiar with the term, do you want to describe womps for us, Lucy?
yeah, so I don't really know when womps popped up. I'll tell you actually, the exact reference, Drag Race fans, is Jocelyn Fox when she used to always do an aside to camera and go womp womp, and that's how it, you know, took off. I'm not really the CEO, Jocelyn Fox is, but when I started posting more, and I don't like this content anymore. This was a funny thing as well, like the sort of body positivity. It's not, you know, because so much of it's been taken over by.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm totally on a level with you with that one.
Yeah, and a lot of it as well. Side note, a lot of it. I remember the era of the like leggings photos, right, where all belly roll, but unedited. That was just a sales pitch for leggings. That was to show you could get a snatch.
The leggings can hide the rolls. Yeah,
that was what it was. Let's call a spade a spade. Anyway, speaking of side quests, when I was showing a bit more body oddy and all that, I was very aware that if you use certain words like boobs and such, the algorithm wouldn't like it so much. So I was like, let's come up with one that's completely gender neutral, because I think people can be really left out of conversations when you use like particularly gendered language or stuff like that. And I was like, do you know what? Let's call them womps. Let's call them wompers. Let's keep it womping. So basically anything you've got going on or haven't got going on in this space is your womps.
Your womps. That's it. And that's me lesson with Lucy today. I also think as well, it helps to, I don't know about you, if you even like thought of this, but I think it helps to like desexualize it a bit as well. Yeah. Because I don't know how you feel, but I made a post like, because I have somewhat big boobs, nowhere near as big as Lucy, but I have somewhat big boobs, and I always have. I remember growing boobs in like year 6, and I was like so self-conscious of it, because all of a sudden the way men looked at me, and women to be honest, the way people looked at me just changed overnight. And looking back on it, that's really scary for like a child to go through that. And I always had this like complicated relationship with my boobs, where I like wearing clothes that might be a little bit revealing, a little bit you wouldn't know it today because I'm sitting here in this big jacket because I'm freezing my ass off, but yeah, like I always find as well that I just think when people say like, oh, she's showing off her boobs,
she knows what she's doing,
she's putting on a leggy display. Is she, or does she just have boobs? And I think like, I know there might be situations, it's all circumstantial, where you are showing off your boobs and where that is the aim, but there are also, I think every day, like you are also just existing with boobs.
I think like the funny thing is as well, with being a baby gal or whatever, the men, they think it's for the men, and when you wear a certain thing, you very much blamed, and you get the attention you want. Here's the attention you want, blah blah blah. But the honest truth is, men make me never want to wear any of these clothes out, and the majority of times I don't. I have a spare dress in my bag right now to put on to get the train that's completely covered up, because I would not be comfortable wearing what I'm comfortable wearing in front of you, in front of them. I don't want the attention, and I get that so much. Is, you know what you're doing here, like you crave male validation. I'm engaged. Like,
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. They make me sick. With peace and love. Makes me sick. You don't know, you just assume everything a girl does is for you. It's not. If there weren't men, I would wear less. If men weren't so weird about boobs, I'd see more of them.
No, but like, it's so true. It's so true. And I think because I used to post a lot more, maybe more like revealing content, or I used to post more like lingerie pics. I mean, multitude of reasons why I don't do that now. One being I don't have as great of a relationship with my body as I did back a few years ago, which so many reasons for that. And also like, the comments that I would get as well would be so weird. And it was weird because funnily enough, men don't come into my headspace very often, because unless you are a gay man, or unless you are a gay man or my family and you're a man, you're probably not in my headspace. Like I cannot fathom these men who go about the internet thinking that everything is posted for them. It is mind-blowing to me.
One of my closest friends, as long as we've known each other, she's been a sex worker, and when we read the comments, like, it is unbelievable to think that these filthy, hideous comments, do they think when they type them that they are well received? You can't imagine what goes through the head. And also, I just think, can you imagine, you say your family, say we had like a male cousin or a brother or whatever, if you saw them writing something like that, I have to believe there is no one I hold love for in my heart that spends their time doing it, because I just can't imagine. I'd be mortified, and you would think that they would be mortified to think that someone could be reading them that knows them, but they're clearly not, because there's so many of them.
And sometimes they'll do it with like a picture of their wife in the profile picture, and I'm like, what are you doing, my guy? I remember I even replied to this guy once. I was like, go look after your children. And he was like, don't talk about my kids. I'm like, don't talk about my don't talk about my kids. Don't talk about my tits with your children in your profile picture. Are you insane?
It's all got so much worse with the rise of
Andrew Tate,
the rise of the men.
With men in general being
men
more
with
prominent.
microphones.
Take them away. But talking about like comments specifically, I feel like as disabled women on the internet, we have received a very specific brand of comments, shall I say. And I remember when I first started getting these comments being like totally flabbergasted, and it would be comments in the vein of like sexualizing my disability. And it was really, really weird, because I was going through a lot of like personal feelings about not feeling very like sexy myself, and like struggling with my relationships and things like that. And then like I kind of reclaimed this little piece of myself where I was like having fun with lingerie and kind of like, you know, repairing the relationship with my body. And then all of a sudden started to experience these comments from men saying the most vulgar stuff, and it wasn't just sexualizing, it's like violent as well. So a lot of the comments that I will maybe get would be like, oh, I'd love to put you in a wheelchair, but you're already there, or, you know, like and things like that, and like other comments which were like really like scary to read. And I know
they're threats, and it's, I don't know to even say them out loud, but the ones about not being able to run away, for example, and that makes you the perfect girl, or that they'll make you need another stick, etc., like, what are you trying to say? Because that's violent. Why are you saying that? And why is that never censored or anything? Why is that never like looked upon by obviously none of the social media bosses give a
don't give a shit
anymore,
the amount of times that I have like reported comments and that they have gone nowhere. But I feel like I was somewhat aware of like the desexualization of disabled people, and I feel like for disabled men that's probably like quite a big issue as well. And so because I feel like with this topic, I'm really passionate about it, and I feel like with men they maybe experience it in the terms of like desexualization, and that must be, you know, quite like hard to grapple with in their sense of like self-identity and stuff like that. But disabled women really experience such a scary form of, I would call it maybe like hypersexualization. It's basically the issue is that the autonomy of sex is taken away from disabled people, and there's two opposite ends of the spectrum.
And going back to like things that have been said on podcasts or whatever, one of the can't believe how common the trope is at this point to make, especially wheelchair users, women, the butt of the joke in like a really nasty way, like really look down on them or really, really sexualize it. Yeah. And it's so strange. But going back to hypersexualization and like fetishization.
That's a really hard word to say, isn't it? Fetishization.
And there's a community called devotees, aren't they? Who
yeah, I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Until I became disabled.
Yeah. And it's there's like specific niches even in that, and again, like you learn as you go with this kind of thing, and something that you maybe thought was innocent once upon a time, like there's accounts that follow me that are very, very brace centric or split. And at first I didn't think much of it, and then you have a look and you realize, oh, that's a fetish that I didn't consent to being a part of. Like, and it must be true of most every condition. Now, what I was going to say, so it's interesting to think of it in those ways. But what I also found when I became disabled was that I started really hypersexualizing myself.
Right.
And I've tried to sort of like work through this recently, and I hate to like sound like a victim mentality and all things like that, but I can remember when I not long had come out of hospital and I'd got my phone back for the first time. And I remember men that I'd known for years and years and years, messaging me, how you doing, whatever, like people that I'd been to college with or whatever. And obviously I just had a brain disease. I was on the brink of death. And within the first 5 minutes of this conversation about this awful thing, they would try to start sexting. And it was, I've like send pictures, like whatever, all of this stuff. And not just one, like multiple. That's the first conversation we've had in months. And something so awful has just happened to me. And I was so incredibly vulnerable. And I know maybe people might look at me now and think, oh yeah, of course, I've got a brain injury. Like I'm I've had a tough time. And at that point I was so depressed, so not functioning at my normal rate. And I was so ill. And it was like they wouldn't treat me like I was a vulnerable person because all they were thinking about was their cock. Like they couldn't see me as anything other than,
they didn't see you as a person.
And when you're learning about yourself again, like I say, from scratch, this is your first dive into speaking with men again, you're learning that's what you're worth, that's what your purpose is, and that's like your value. And I carried that so much with my dating life over the next years, as sort of I would lead so heavily with sex because I felt like that was all I had to offer. I felt like that was added to that, the internalized ableism. And I remember, and I hate to think that I ever thought like this now, that like people wouldn't want to date me because I couldn't do certain things and this, that and the other. And you add those two things together and suddenly you're only presenting yourself in that way because you think nobody's interested in you anyway. You've had this really dark backstory that's a lot of baggage, whatever. You've lost control of your body. You don't feel like yourself. But what do men like? What are they interested in? Oh, I'll say this. And as I say, I really wasn't well as well. So I was constantly saying and doing things that I didn't believe in, I didn't enjoy, because I thought it was all I was worth. And it's so sad now, and I wonder like how common that is, to be honest. And it wasn't until really that I met my fiance now, and everything sort of changed, and that wasn't like even on the table. He was so supportive and interested in me as a person. I went down some absolutely bizarre avenues because of that, and I know I hate like sound like it's an excuse and everything, but those experiences really altered the way that I saw myself. And then getting those kind of comments and stuff like that, Yeah, weird one.
No, you're definitely not alone in that. I think even outside of disability, it's quite common for women who experience like abuse or any kind of trauma to kind of like, because you want to feel loved. Everyone wants to feel loved. Everyone wants to feel wanted, especially in a position where, you know, if we've, as you say, we've had something traumatic happen to our bodies. And I feel like it is very, very common to then to just reach out in whatever ways you know that you can.
Yeah.
And it's so sad as well. Like I remember I was literally still in hospital, and my boyfriend at the time, before he broke up with me, in hospital a few weeks later, literally being sat next to me, and like it had only been like a few weeks, and I remember him asking me, "Oh, do you think you can still have sex?" And I'm like, I remember looking at him going, "I don't know, and I don't care right now."
Yeah.
Like,
awful.
how can that be on your brain? It had not even crossed my mind. My mind, first of all, was, am I going to survive this?
Yeah.
What does my future look like? Like, am I, like, you know, like, will I be able to walk? Will I, you know, all of these things, like, and that's where your brain is. Absolutely flabbergasted me. And then as well, like, because I know we mentioned devotees earlier, I'm just going to like give a little description for anyone who's maybe like not, if you're lucky enough to not be familiar with the word, but like a devotee, how would you describe it? It's someone who is basically, their fetish is like disabled people.
Yeah. And it's sometimes it's quite sinister, because it can be that they enjoy watching someone struggle. So
Yeah.
yeah, because to make it too intense, but so to watch someone getting into a car or something out there with something that takes more effort or could, you know, be a struggle, they would enjoy watching a person, which is or that they really enjoy the idea of having to fully take care of someone, and someone being what they would say is like powerless or something. Which
it is a power play. That's exactly what it is. And I remember like learning about it quite early on into like my sort of like journey on social media, and it's really affected the way that I behave on there and the things that I post, because sometimes I'll get like requests for content, and part of me will think like, okay, but do you need that because you need help with something? So say like someone will be like, oh, can you post a video on like how do you do transfers, so like getting in and out of your chair and stuff, or like, you know, how do you get in that your car? I've done videos where I show how I get out of my car, and the whole time I was posting it I was like, I really hope this hits the right people. And I had to reconcile with myself, like, posting this, I know that there's going to be people fetishizing this. And I hate that. I really do. I'm just getting mad about it now that I'm sitting there thinking that I'm posting this video because I know I would have found it helpful when I like first became disabled, because I didn't know how to do these things. But there's so many like other things that I would love to post to help other disabled people, but I don't, because there is a part of me that is just like, I'm not opening myself up to that more.
You don't know where it's going to end up on the internet.
But yeah, you do have to be careful what you post on the internet. And I think a lot of, from what I'm like gathering about our conversation as well, is like so much of our experience of becoming disabled women was so much of a learn in the moment. Like you literally learn as you go, like it with everything, like learning how to do everyday tasks, learning how people see you. Even though I remember like the first time I sort of realized that people saw me differently and people spoke to me differently, it really fucked with my like self-identity. And then also you're learning that the world is maybe a lot scarier than you thought like it initially was, and there are all these other things you have to be careful of. But also as well, obviously talking about like we mentioned inspiration porn earlier, didn't we? And I know we've had several chats about this before, but I remember when I used to post like lingerie pics or just like, you know, like a bit more of like sexy like content, I would have people who were like followed for inspiration, unfollowing now, and I'm like, okay. And I do think that there is an issue of inspiration porn in general, which by the way, by definition, if people don't know what inspiration porn is, it's kind of like the idea that like disabled people are, I think it's infantilizing, but personally think it's infantilizing, but it's where disabled people are kind of just used and mined for their inspiration. And I think there's a fine line, because I think like for you as a person, I find you inspiring. I think you've done inspiring things, and like as a friend, you inspire me. But there is a fine line between finding someone inspiring and also just going like, if you see a disabled person in Tesco and then being like, oh, you're such an inspiration.
Well done for leaving the house.
Well done for leaving the house. And it comes from all of these outdated ideas that we have about disability. But how do you feel about like sort of like inspiration porn? And because you must experience it a lot.
Yeah, I think it sort of ties into a lot of our work, and again probably what we would take in at the start of our careers or whatever, not really realizing that brands were using us for inspiration porn. And there was a in fact, I feel like this is one of the times that we bonded to begin with, was that there was a campaign that I was part of, and they really farmed that story. They I was in front of the camera crying, and they were all nodding and and all this, and I thought it was fine. I thought, oh, I'm in a campaign, this is great. And then not the week later, they invited everybody, all the models from this campaign to the campaign was called like Celebrate You and Difference, blah blah blah, whatever. And they invited everyone to this event to like celebrate the campaign or whatever, but they didn't invite me.
I do remember
and
this.
The reason they didn't invite me was because the location wasn't accessible, so they just didn't bother inviting me. They invited everyone else, and I just never heard about it. And I remember that was one of the first times that I was so devastated that I'd given away for them to get a load of likes, because by heck did they when they posted my thing. For them to have that and get all the accolades of looking like they'd included me. You didn't include me.
Yep.
You didn't include me, or you didn't include any disabled customers in that. How can you have a campaign celebrating diversity, but yet your pop-up shop, not a single disabled person can come through the doors? That's remarkable. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember really going off for you on that one. I stood, ironically, 10 toes down on that, because I was like, how fucking dare they?
Yeah.
Because also as well, they were still continuing to post images from your campaign.
Yeah.
And they were still posting like inspirational, wear for everybody shit. And I was like, no, I'm not fucking having it anymore.
And I was so disappointed as well. And I think that there's a lot of times where that, we are the largest minority group in the world. I think there's a lot of times where there isn't really any solidarity with disabled people, because I can remember the other models, obviously none of them were disabled. I remember none of them having a problem with it as well, and they would be posting as well. I had to unfollow them all, and I thought, that's such a shame as well. But it was just hurtful, because I thought we all got along so well in the day, and again, you all sat there and nodded whilst I told you this awful story.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to say anything too personal, but like you're crying on camera about how excited you are that you were included because you've got tattoos. Well, what about the fact that they didn't even have me at the flipping pop-up store because they couldn't be bothered to make it an accessible venue?
Yeah.
Like, you got to like look out for each other in this kind of industry, and very often disability is like the last taboo, and it makes you feel very inferior when you get treated like that, and other people are okay with it. And I think there's been so many instances. I mean, that was just something that happened to me lots of years ago, but I remember when we spoke earlier, this is just another example, about some of the comments that have been made by bigger public figures about ladies who use wheelchairs, and there's just silence from everyone. We're a big community, and there's a lot of voices. You're all seeing it. You're all aware that it's happening when everyone you follow is talking about it, but you're more concerned about this big creator. Maybe, I don't know, what are you concerned with? And then 2 months later, he's on Foot Locker, Foot Asylum, whatever it is.
I know exactly who you're talking
about.
It
doesn't touch them. It doesn't touch them because we're still able to be attacked without, which is, and whatever, like, I'm not saying, cancel everyone, but like, it would be nice if there was more
solidarity or like I think it's what it mean. It just shows, I think, within like the issue of like the campaign we're talking about where you were excluded as well, it highlights why intersectional feminism is so important. When we were talking about the issue of hypersexualization of disabled women and the infantilization of disabled women, it's such an important feminist issue, but it's not really, I don't see a lot of like feminist figures talking about it. And the particular campaign you're talking about with the really big creator, by the way, I've got something to tell you about that, I'll tell you off camera. But there were very few other female creators, non-disabled female creators, who really like stood up in that moment and said like, I don't understand why like you're all okay with this. There was one who was, she's a really good friend of mine, and she actually like, really went to town on it and really said like, this is not okay. And if it was any other issue, if they were being homophobic, I don't think people would stand for it. Like, so why is it any different because it is disability? And as you say, I think that's not to say that homophobia doesn't still exist. Of course it does. But I do feel like it's what you said, like disability being the last taboo.
Yeah.
And that's why I do get so annoyed when people are so quick to use disabled people for inspiration porn, but they don't want to talk about all of these other issues.
Yeah.
If you want to use disabled people for inspiration porn, or you want to get inspiration from disabled people, but you don't want to talk about how the hyacinth crisis is affecting disabled people, if you don't want to talk about issues with PIP, if you don't want to talk about all of these other, the infantilization of disabled people, the way that disabled women experience sexual assault 3 times more. If you don't want to talk about all of that stuff, but you're happy to jump and cheer when the Paralympics come on, I don't give a fuck. Like, seriously, like, it's just, it annoys me so much. And I think that is the problem with inspiration porn, is the fact that it just uses disabled people for what non-disabled people want. Yeah. It mines them for like inspiration, and it doesn't look at all of these other things, all of these other societal and structural issues that like people are just happy to ignore. But thinking particularly about like on like social media and stuff, do you ever feel like, because I know I felt like when I would have people be like, oh, like, you used to think you followed you for inspiration, I'm following now. Do you ever find like as a disabled woman, you find it hard to kind of like explore or like show or even just get across like other facets of yourself because people are fixated on like, talk more about your accident or talk more about your disability, talk more about your brain injury?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've had so many problems with people being unable to see me as like a multifaceted being, and particularly because it is hilarious to me that people get so cross to see me, a disabled person, when I'm working with lingerie brands, you know, and then suddenly that's all I am. But like, how do you think that these brands sell bras? Like, you have to know what it looks like on someone, and it doesn't mean anything beyond the fact that I'm showing you what it looks like on a body. And I even made like a thread about this week, is that I've got a very niche body. I'm very curvy up top, and I'm also disabled. You don't really see that many places, but there are other people that exist that do look like that, and it's nice to see yourself somewhere. It's nice, you know, that's why representation is so important, because, you know, it makes people feel more included, and extra diversity is always fabulous. I'd love more. Mm-hmm. I'm a DEI queen.
Well, that particularly important to say that this week. Like, there is nothing wrong with diversity and inclusion. We want to see more of it.
More.
More, please.
Yeah, but they instead of like seeing that for what it is, and I don't know if it's because of the way that I look or also because I'm disabled, there's plenty of girls who model lingerie without it being a massively sexual thing.
Yes, I always find this so interesting, and I don't know if you feel the same, but I always find it's the more so the girls who don't have as big bigger boobs, but also girls who are like skinnier, petiter, like they can, and they look amazing. I love it. Yeah, they can wear the little like triangle bikinis and like tiny little pant moment. God, I can't fit in a little pant triangle moment, so I'm wearing more material, I promise. But it's you know, it's curvy girls are always seen as more sexual. I don't know if men again. Yeah. But they're wearing way less, and that's fine as well. But I wish that there was like a bit of continuity across the board, even with like censorship on social media anyway. You know, I've had an entire TikTok account deleted before, and I was womping quite significantly, but the other girlies are. Mm-hmm. The little womper ladies are. The mini wompers. But like, as you said, you're not showing anything more. You just, and it's like what we were saying about earlier. It's like, are you showing off your boobs? Are you being purposely sexual, or are you just existing with boobs?
It's just what I look like. And, you know, people argue till they're blue in the face about this, because you were saying this to me earlier before, once somebody has idea in their mind about you or has decided what they think about you, you're pretty much never ever gonna convince them otherwise. And I still to this day struggle with just holding my breath and just, you want to defend yourself. It's not normal to like face, it's not normal for any human being to constantly read negative stuff about themselves. It's just not normal. And people say, oh, you put yourself online, you open yourself up to it. True, but it's still shit.
I rebuke that. I think just because you put yourself online doesn't mean you open yourself up to abuse. I know you're not saying that. I know like other people say that. And like I have heard that across time because of what I've been through on social media and stuff. And like people say, well, you put yourself online. I get the train. That doesn't mean I consent to being abused on the train. Do you know what I mean?
And you know, we had these life-changing circumstances happen to us, and until you've rolled a mile, walked a mile, whatever, in our shoes, you don't really know how the employment thing goes after that. Like, we've had to carve new paths for ourselves, and finding accessible work isn't easy, and going online is something that we've been able to do. And I know for myself, when I was really, really ill, I had no network of people for support around me. Part of my illness went through the first lockdown and shielding, and I was completely on my own. And the only communication I would have throughout the day would be on social media, and through meeting other disabled people my sort of age, through that, taught me so much about myself and what I was experiencing, and solidarity, and it removed some of the isolation I was feeling. And when I go back to what I was saying earlier about a time where I was experiencing such internalized ableism that I thought, oh, you're never going to have a relationship and all this, and then I would see these friends that I'd made who were also disabled in like these lovely relationships, and I would never ever put any of these thoughts I'm having about myself on any of them, and it was so helpful. So we deserve to be able to take up space online. It's so important to have community and to be able to learn from each other, and also I take it as a huge privilege that I've been able to spread any awareness of encephalitis through my platform. And to be able to do that, you also have to take all the criticism and everything, and that's rubbish. Like, we're not putting ourselves out there with bad intention or anything, and we're not trying to poke the bear or anything. We're just trying to be like our authentic disabled selves and build something that we deserve.
But also as well, I think when people just say, oh, will you put yourself out there, like I do honestly think it's just people not wanting to take personal accountability for just being absolute cocks. Like, because people are getting meaner. Like, some of the stuff I see people say about each other, I think that's disgusting. And like, I think at some point you do just have to like just take personal responsibility and say, just because you can say something doesn't mean you should. And I think it in your head. Like, if you want to, put it in your fucking group chat. Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I think as well, because you'll probably get a better response from your best mate. You probably have a good old laugh about me. That's fine if I don't have to know about it. But my fiance is completely offline, and it's been so refreshing to me, because I'm chronically online. I'm happy. I'm fine to say that he is so chronically offline. But when I tell him, like, if I'm affected by a comment or whatever, and at this point I've heard most of them a million times, so I'm fine. But if I read out what people have written to me, he just, like, in the real world, normal people honestly think people who do that are such losers.
Yeah.
Like, when Mr. Boat, name reveal never happening, hears that there are other men or women or any people spending their time sat type. He even thinks like people who sit and spend time writing nice comments. It's bizarre to him, because there's life outside of
social
there's
media.
Definitely life outside of being nasty to people on social media.
I genuinely had a friend in my building, my apartment complex, stopped me the other day, and he was like, hey, I saw something, like a nasty comment you got the other day, like you posted on your story. I just wanted to say, like, like, hope you're all right. Like, I just can't believe people write that stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, because in the real world, like, people don't talk to each other like that. And I just do, sometimes I read comments, I just think, go outside. And I used to hate the whole touch grass thing. I used to think it was quite like narrow-minded, but now I read some things and I'm like, go touch grass.
I actually think now people have got more emboldened because of the landscape of what's going on with
politics
people.
In general.
The meaner they are, for some reason, it's more pathetic to me to read, because especially all these like blank accounts and everything, we know what incels are.
Yeah,
we know what you look like. We know you're probably 14 years old. Like, you calling me ugly 56 ways, does it change the fact
I'm like, okay, but also ugly is not the worst thing I could be. I'd rather be ugly than be fucking mean. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I'm
ugly, I'll
go. Okay, maybe I am ugly. At least I'm not fucking mean. How about that?
Yeah.
But going back to, I want to have the conversation about OnlyFans. Do you right to have that conversation?
Yeah, I think we. So what I was saying earlier about accessible work, and I feel like this topic ties into so many parts of my journey, but it's something that I've never spoken about because, again, it's another taboo thing, and it's also something that I'm still not sure how I feel about myself. I feel very uncomfortable that it's part of my journey. Oh, sorry, I just hit the microphone. But it is part of the journey, and I feel like when you start understanding yourself a bit more, having done something that I would never have chosen to do, now I'm, the more you talk to other people and everything, I understand why I did it. Yeah. And it starts off with these conversations of people sort of telling you that that's what you're worth. And then there's I desperately wanted to work after I became disabled. I so wanted to be doing something, and I tried and tried, and I had a graduate internship, and it was like a office job. I had a brain injury. I couldn't do it. And it's hard to say that you can't do something, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I can't read things on a screen properly. I just can't. That's part of my condition. So that didn't last. I tried working in retail. They told me, get you crutch. It was when I used 2 crutches. You can't have them on the shop floor. You're making the floor look untidy. They wouldn't give me a seat behind the till. And that was at a time where I had no idea about my rights as a disabled person, and I had no community. This is before social media, before I had a platform that I do now. And I was desperate, and people wouldn't hire me because health and safety. I could not get employment for want or anything. And I'd opened my Instagram up publicly for the first time so I could share what was the story with the brain disease. And at the same time, there were people telling me, start OnlyFans, do OnlyFans, and all of this. And there was a specific fetish, and it wasn't anything to do with disability. It wasn't anything to do with disability, but it was something called bimbofication. And I've always absolutely loved, this is fine. I've always absolutely loved the look of really curvy women. I love long blonde hair,
90s Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, and I love pink.
Yeah,
and that seemed all in keeping with this fetish. And at first, I thought that that's what it was. I thought it was just really, really hyper feminine, girly. And it wasn't until I was in it that I realized that and this isn't disrespect to it. And the girls, they're the loveliest girls, and you find that with sex workers are the most supportive, lovely girls, and fully support sex workers. I just don't know where I stand on sex work like that. And it's fine. I think that's fine to say that it's such a nuanced thing that I am not the person to make any definitive statements.
Yeah.
This bimbofication thing, the reason that the men liked me was because they liked the fact that I had a brain disease, because the idea is that I don't know what I can say, but you're a fuck doll, and I could be their paralyzed fuck doll and all this stuff. They liked the fact that I was an airhead in the literal sense. The fact that I had the brain injury, and that it does something really bad to you to start seeing yourself like that. And I went down a path that was desperation. I was desperate for money. I didn't have a pence, and I wanted my independence. No one would employ me. And I think people maybe forget that I'm just a girl from Grimsby. I'm not, you might think that someone's something they're not, but that was how I supported myself for years. And that was what you were seeing, and I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't promoting it anywhere, because I was also desperately trying to get the word out about encephalitis. And I wanted to do something that was making me proud, but I also had to live. And sex work is an accessible job. So many sex workers are disabled because there just aren't many jobs that you can do where you have as much flexibility, pardon the pun, and elsewise as that. But my experiences with men before doing that, during doing that, and after doing that have not been positive ones, and I never enjoyed it. And there's people who do genuinely enjoy doing that, and it's not to disrespect them in the slightest, and it's not to disrespect anyone doing it. It's just for me personally, also because I was so out of touch with my body, and I'd lost so much control of how I looked, and I hated myself for so many reasons, and it was making it worse because every day I was having to look at myself with less clothes, and I'd be comfortable, and for it was just the only way that I was seeing myself was as an object, really, because that was how I was treated. Every time I had to open, it's not even an app, it's a web page, I would have this horrific anxiety. What seems like, oh, it's an easy job, it takes so much mental strength to do it. And for me, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't, and it's people, I've seen people say like, oh, she's a failed OnlyFans model, like can't be making much money. Believe me, if I could mentally do it, I'd be in a much better position now than I am. Like I'm, back to really struggling again, and but compared to how depressed it was making me, and I really wanted to jump off the planet when I was doing that because of the interactions I was having, because of the way that I saw myself, like I couldn't carry on doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you say, like, it is such a nuanced topic. And I think, like, as you said before as well, the most important thing is, I think for me, like, hearing that is, it really just reinforces how nuanced the topic is. Because I have very conflicting opinions around OnlyFans and sex work, things like that. But my worries come from wanting to support sex workers, wanting to protect sex workers. Yeah. And I think the problem that we're in now with figures like Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips and that,
who's allegedly pregnant today.
I do
Saw
not
that
know.
in the taxi on the way here.
Really, we will find out by the time this episode goes live. We'll probably know. It's probably not true, but whatever. But with figures like those, like doing sensationalized things like sleeping with 1,000 men in a day, and they're clearly making fucking bank, right? They are making like millions and millions. They could retire probably by their late 30s if they want to.
And you'd never hear either of them boost like a charity for sex workers, or you'd never hear them talk about women who are trafficked into sex work. And I've thought about it. Some people are able to do OnlyFans without any stigma attached, and a good example of that is people who've been on Love Island can suddenly, they've got all these hundreds of thousands of followers, they can whack it on their main with the link and nobody's judgmental, they just make loads of money. But then there's other people, I've just hit the mic again, who it becomes something that's almost life ruining. It follows you forever. You'll never work with any brands or anything again. And it's so interesting who is able to do it and be given grace still, and who isn't.
Yeah, and who is treated still like a human, who is given the basic respect. But the thing I worry about with like Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips is like the glamorization of sex work, because I think we need to obviously absolutely respect sex workers, and I think like we need to make it in a position where sex workers we're normalizing it to a state where sex workers can get help, where they can reach out if they find themselves in like a difficult position. But I think that is true for a lot of nuanced topics, like even like things like drugs and stuff like that. Like the part of normalizing it is so that the people who are who are within it, who are within that system and within that area, is so that they can get help, right? But I think there's a difference between like normalizing, supporting, and not judging, and then glamorizing. And I feel like that is where I worry is that you've got people like Bonnie Blue, Lily Phillips, people who are making millions and millions, and also are essentially like adjacent influencers as well. And
Astrid Wet, that's another one, isn't it?
I don't know who that is. Yeah. But then you see like lots of like younger people who are then like, as you say, like you think of, oh, that's an easy job, I'll do that. But there are so many other layers to sex work.
And I think like to be able to be a OnlyFans, that's a privilege in itself, to be doing that kind of sex work. But also like you should be safe if you're doing sex work, and without the demand it wouldn't exist. And who's demanding it? The patriarchy. And it's interesting. I also think like some people get trapped in it for a completely different reason, in that maybe that's because there is a lot of money in sex work. Maybe suddenly now they've got this tax bill that they're never going to be able to pay unless they keep it going. And when it comes to Lily Phillips, I did watch the documentary. First of all, something that was spoken about is that these girls doing these huge stunts makes it a lot more difficult for other sex workers who maybe don't have the same platform and everything to keep up, because do they have to then start doing more things out of their comfort zone and everything to try and maintain their followers, whatever, I don't know. Lily Phillips,
yeah,
she has like a team around her who are all now on payroll. Now she's young, they're obviously going to be encouraging more of whatever makes the most money. But again, every single detail of all of this stuff is so nuanced, because I think that when that documentary came out, suddenly a lot of people shifted and had a bit of empathy because they saw that she was, and then you think, is that because she's a skinny white blonde? Would that be the same for other people as well? Like it's all so nuanced, and she is young, and it's you just sort of wonder where it all goes next. Like, what's the next thing?
Yeah, because it just gets bigger and bigger. Like, she's doing an all backdoor event soon, and I just think like I was talking about with one of my friends, and I was like, just how much more at risk is she going to put herself? Like, it's getting dangerous and dangerous. Like, she's doing however many men she can in a day. It's just anal sex, and like, we get to the point, and I felt so dystopian reading that. And I have never considered myself someone who felt conservative or a bit more rigid about sex, but I feel like the more we're seeing like these kind of events in like society and stuff like that, and become more mainstream, and like, because it's not like it's some dodgy underground part of the internet. Everyone is talking about it. Yeah. Like, I found myself becoming, I don't know, like it does impact my own perception of myself. And like, and the more I talk about it, the more I see people talking about it and like talking about these things, like it has made me look at, like, I don't know, like it has made me question like my view on myself and my body and my relationship to sex as well. And I really do worry more about like younger people who are like exposed to that.
Tell you something that's like I'm very, very aware of as well, and talking about younger people, is that there's these hundreds and hundreds, thousands of huge accounts on Instagram, and some very, very famous celebrities and a lot of blue tickers. When you're maybe someone that looks like me, maybe a much younger version or whatever, they come into your DMs, right? And this is a scheme that I didn't even really know about until a couple of years ago. They slide into your DMs. Hi, Lucy. Oh my gosh, can we chat? Whatever. And what it is there's these OnlyFans agencies that pay to be inside these big blue tick accounts to recruit the girls and make it look like, oh, you're talking to this celebrity, and they're getting a huge cut. They're owning the people's rights, and they are going to, I've got an opportunity for you, got this great opportunity, and really disguising what it is. And there's, it goes, I can't remember, I watched a documentary recently about, I can't remember what it's called. It's not OnlyFans, but it's like in-person kind of jobs that are sold to these young girls as like extras work or whatever, and when they get there, they're offered big amounts of money to do more than what they thought they were going to do and everything. And it's so scandalous that they're using these people who you might think are like certified people, reliable people, or that it's your way into like a better life. You're being offered money, be it like a glamorous lifestyle, and it's not. It's seedy and it's dangerous, and that is how trafficking and things happen. And it's so sad to think that with technology advancing, these kind of things have been able to advance as well, and how many people are falling for it, and not that many people are talking about it. But we all know about it.
Yeah, I didn't know about it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But obviously we've spoke about so much stuff today, and there is obviously so much nuance to the topics that we spoke about, whether it is, like disability in general, or OnlyFans, sex work, social media, all of that stuff. And obviously there's some really dark parts of like your journey and like just the world in general that we spoke about today. But thinking about social media overall and Instagram overall, and obviously the community that you've built, because you have built like an amazing community on there. Overall, do you find it to be like a positive, good experience?
Yeah, I like the people that follow me, and you got your I keep hitting your mic. You got your broadcast channels now on Instagram, and I think that's been such a lovely place for people who have like no bad intention, just like love, and to have people all gathered in one place and realize that like you've got so many internet friends that you just didn't even know you had. And even last week when I touched in one story on OnlyFans, I've been so concerned and terrified for years now to let anybody know that I did it, because I was so worried of what people would say. It was just something I couldn't handle feedback on. Like, I just didn't want, not because I say this to my friend, you can't be ashamed of you can't feel shame for something you're not ashamed of, and I shouldn't feel ashamed for doing what I had to do at the time, but I was still worried that other people would put that on me, without experience in my life. So to have posted that and just get this absolute outpouring of niceness and support, I feel like at that moment it was just what I needed. And I know you've spoken before about, which is ridiculous in advance, about feeling like there's moments where you felt like you're in your flop era, and I've sort of self believed that I was in my flop era, and it was because I just was too scared to talk about anything anymore, like because I felt like my voice was not important, and also that I just was, I don't know if it's like a brain injury thing, but just always getting things wrong. And, you know, there's a lot of whataboutism on the internet, and sometimes it makes you panicky, and you just think, I'm getting something wrong, I'm upsetting someone, you know, and you never want to do that, especially with people that follow you. So to talk about a topic that I thought was going to be super, super divisive, and see that people were really supportive, I was just like, oh, maybe I've created this worry a bit in myself, and maybe I should let go again. And because in the very beginning, when I didn't have a platform and I was just really chaotic and struggling, you are your most authentic self in that moment, because you're not thinking that you're going to let anyone down. You just like, I don't know, just posting. And I'd love to get back to that. And when people were kind to me this week, that's the thing, you forget that people are kind to you on the internet.
When some people are nice to me on social, I'm like, but
there are so many of them. It's sometimes you get clouded by the ones that aren't. And I think this year I'd love to like remember how lovely people are. And when you're out in the real world again and you bump into people that follow you, it's always the most lovely interaction. And it's always people that you look at and think, I'd love to be friends with you. Like, what a lovely human you are. And those are the wonderful people that have built us up and given us community and support. And so for that reason, and for all the friends that I've made and things that I've learned and continue to learn, I love that we have social media, and I love my one pets.
The one pets, I love that. I mean, I think I speak for everyone. I'd say we would love to see more Lucy this year. We'd love to see more.
I bet you would.
Yeah, I'd love to see more Lucy this year. I would love to see more unapologetic, joyful Lucy in whatever way you want to show up. Because, you know, I loved seeing you on my feed, and I think I speak for everyone. I say we would love to see more of you showing up.
Yeah, that's what you do, so much like varied content. And I know I've struggled because I just sat in my bedroom most of the time, but I do feel like the last year or so I have just become like this dress up Barbie doll who don't really do anything or say anything. But it's because I've panicked myself that I've just not got anything good to say, and maybe I just gotta let go.
Just let go. And
how did I do, guys?
Yeah, just, I mean, well, if you ever want to talk about any of that stuff, you can just give me a little bell. We can have a little rant. But thank you so much for coming on, Lucy. I've got one final question for you, and that is, how are you chasing joy this week?
I thought about this in the car on the way here. So when me and Mr. Boat, whenever we're having like a particularly tough time at home, we get the mattresses from upstairs. Well, he does. I'm disabled, leave me alone. And we put the mattresses downstairs in the lounge, and we have like a little camping fort. And I live with 3 really big fluffy cats as well. So we spend the evenings and we sleep downstairs and we camp. And it for some reason it brings like a bit of like kiddish joy, I think, and it sort of does a bit of a mental reset. So we've got them down at the minute, and I'm just so excited to get back out of London, back to good old Lincoln, see my cats, chase joy, pick up cat shit, change litter boxes, and see my nice, lovely, wonderful fiance.
He sounds amazing. I miss Lincoln. You need to give Lincoln a little wave for me.
Yeah, because you did your graduate speech. So was that last year? God.
That was 2 years ago now.
It's 2 years ago.
2 years ago now.
Look at you. Success story.
Well, yeah, we'll see about that. But thank you so much for joining, Lucy. Honestly, I really, really loved this chat. I hope it's been fun, therapeutic for you as well.
Yeah, I'll probably have a big breath after I think,
whew. We'll go get a drink now. Well, lovely. Thank you. It's been lovely chatting you. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.